Hello, hello. So we're going to get started at 11 o'clock. Can everyone just do me a favor and tell me if you can hear me clearly? Good morning, everyone. We're going to wait a little bit before getting started. I just wanted to start a little early to make sure there were no technical issues because you never know. This is the first time I'm trying something like this, so there's a pretty decent chance I might make a terrible mistake somewhere in the middle of it. Uh, and of course, my cat is moving around just behind the camera. If you want to see her, a lot of people have asked me about her, so that's her, and she's going to be keeping me company through the stream. So please let me know if you think there's anything funny or if the video quality is not okay. So we are going to be using a bunch of tools that I've researched. So we have a really nifty virtual blackboard, which you can see here. Uh, I'm used to teaching with a blackboard, so I can't help it. I have to use a blackboard. I have to write stuff. It's just easier for me. And I think PowerPoints are kind of boring. And I have a bunch of really neat things to show everyone during the stream. So I have cameras, of course. I have a cat, which you've already seen. She's going to make guest appearances to the whole thing. Uh, I have film, and I have some negatives to show you too. So these are digital negatives, and sorry, these are film negatives, obviously, and this is a part of the photography history session. So you get to see some negatives as well. And of course, I have some book recommendations for you for additional reading. So if you guys have any questions before we get started, this is a good time. We got 8 minutes before we get started. Uh, Let me just share the course content again with everyone so you know what you're getting yourself into. Just give me 1 second. Go to close the slideshow. Shut the slideshow down so you don't see that. And I'm going to show you the course content once again. All right. So, so Gina, yes, some of the stuff which we're going to go over will, of course, talk about different kinds of cameras, including cell phones. As far as possible, I'm going to keep the sessions camera agnostic. So we won't be talking about specific cameras. What we are going to be talking about will apply to every tool that you have. I'm going to be doing short sessions, like half an hour, 1 hour sessions about specific tools. Like if you want to shoot better photos with your cell phone, I'm going to could do that as well. So, but that's not going to be covered under the photography 101. Photography 101, as you can see, is basically understanding at a base level the technical requirements for photography and a bunch of other things. But all the stuff that you see on screen right now, all of that stuff is applicable to every camera, not just a cell phone or not just a DSLR. So if you have any camera, like I have my iPhone right here, and it has an app that lets me do uh, stuff like manual exposure, controlling the shutter speed, controlling the ISO. So these things which we're about to talk about will apply to an iPhone too. Yep, I hope that answers your question. Uh, Regarding the schedule, Naveen, so I didn't know how this was going to go. So my hope is that I do one photography 101 session every 2 days. So the next one will probably be on Thursday. And then um, in the middle of those days, so between the photography 101 sessions and the long courses, I want to do short snippets, like short techniques and things like that. Anything that you guys can suggest, I'm happy to take on. Thank you, sir. Dr. Mamani, thank you very much. I appreciate it. We're all basically stuck at home today, and rather than moan and complain about it, I thought it's better we do something productive with our time. All right. So again, we have 5 more minutes to go. I'm just going to wait for people to join into the stream. And meanwhile, you can have a look at the course outline. So we're talking about photography 101. At the bottom of it, we're going to be talking about uh, the history of photography, where we are, where we were. So it's important for us to appreciate the path that photography as an art took to get us to where we are. Simply because it's a part of what I'm going to be talking about, so I don't want to spoil it. But in any art form, it's important to know the history, or in anything, just so that we understand the sacrifices and the effort people took before us to give us the tools that we use now. So we have the vision, we have the tools. We just need to have an appreciation of how we've gotten to a place where we can make the kind of art that we do right now. Also, guys, just feedback in general. Can you let me know if I speak too quickly? Students of mine already know that I have a tendency to speak really quickly, especially when I get excited. Uh, yes, we will be talking about editing software too. Like I said, it's a part of the course. I'm going to be introducing software tools. The bulk of my experience is basically Lightroom and Photoshop. I know some other tools as well. I use this for work, so I will definitely go over some of the basics. Of course, I highly encourage everyone to install Lightroom. There's a 1 month free trial, and I believe Adobe right now is doing uh, a scheme because of COVID-19, that they give you I think a month or a couple of months of free subscription. So give it a shot, try it out. It's a great piece of software. I literally could not function without it. It's my bread and butter software. Yeah, it's really really good. People complain about Adobe software all the time, but honestly, I could not work or do anything productive without it. So it's super important. Okay, so we're still going to be waiting for a few minutes. Feel free to ask me any questions. I'll keep it organized. If you're curious about the cat, I keep getting questions about the cat offline as well. I don't know why. I'm sure maybe I can just do a session with her looking at the camera. She's far more attractive or photogenic than I am. So maybe I should just keep her in front of the camera while I talk. That'll probably be better for everyone. Sure, Gino. Let's zoom in on this a little bit. So we are going to be starting with history, which is down there. And then, of course, this mind map is not exactly sequential. So from history, the next step of session two is going to be understanding exposure. So that's the sequence of events. After that, we're going to go into other stuff. So we're going to go into creative use of the exposure parameters. So we're going to go into basically our most important tools. the lenses, and then we're going to go into camera controls. Again, as far as possible, I'm going to keep this as camera agnostic, so it should apply to all cameras. Of course, please keep in mind, I don't know what cameras you're using. I don't know how to use every camera. So what might work for my camera might not work for yours, but in general, most of the stuff will apply. And I encourage you to read your camera manual. That's how I learn about this stuff. Inderjeet Pai, yes, of course, we'll be talking a little bit about curves in Lightroom, and that's under software tools. But then you'll have to probably wait uh, a week maybe before we get to it. A week, maybe 10 days. So we're going to be doing software tools. We're going to be doing all of this stuff over the course of maybe 2 weeks. So I'm going to be doing one session every 2 days, and then we'll move ahead from there. So we're almost ready to go. It's almost time. So let me just get my presentation warmed up. Now, just fair warning. I know this session is supposed to be about photography, about the history of photography, but I'm going to start in a slightly different way. So the name of the presentation should be self-explanatory. Let me just pull up the presentation. Just give me 1 second. Yeah. Okay. All right, everyone. So we're ready to go. It's 11 o'clock, 11 o'clock sharp. I hope everyone's ready. I really don't know how much time this is going to take because please forgive me, this is the first time I'm doing something like this. It's a learning experience for me. So I'm just going to get used. I'm going to figure out how to do all this stuff alongside all of you. So if you have suggestions about how I can improve this in the future, uh, please feel free to let me know and I will definitely incorporate that. And if any one of you want to do something like this by yourself, if you want to live stream something, you know something, get in touch with me. We'll figure out a way to enable you to create a setup like this for yourself, so that you can also present. So just as a background, the reason why I decided to do this is we are literally going to be this is the new reality of the world we're in right now. We are not going to be able to go out. We're not going to be able to interact with people as much as we want to. But that doesn't mean we can't learn. That doesn't mean we can't be productive members of society. So we all have skills that we're good at, and it's, I believe, our social responsibility to make sure that we put that out in the world, that people benefit from what we know, especially in trying times like this. And it's going to be a rough few months for everyone. So this is why I decided to do this, and I encourage you, highly encourage you, all of you, to do something of this yourself. I've already spoken to a couple of photographers who are interested in coming on board and talking about their skills, about astrophotography, about macro photography. So we'll be doing sessions like that as well. Right. So without further ado, as you can see, this is what we're going to be talking about. So why should you listen to me? Some of you already know me, so I have the authority there, which I don't like to use, but hey, uh, the rest of you, I've been doing this for a long time. Uh, I've been doing this for over 10 years now. By doing this, I mean teaching, shooting, talking about photography, learning photography. It's been a really long time. And over the course of that time, I have learned how to do every single thing wrong that you can imagine. I've messed up my social media. I've messed up shoots. I've even messed up a couple of relationships. So I've learned a lot over the last 10 years, and photography's been a really important part of my life, and it's gotten me through a lot of rough times in my life. So I'm hoping that it does something to the same, something similar for you as well. So this is called my journey through photography, otherwise called things that photographers will never admit. So as artists, we always want to think that, we're special, we're unique, we're snowflakes, that we can do, that we have an innate talent, an innate gift. But here's the reality of it. Uh, Work will beat talent every single time. The more work you put in, the better you will be, and that's all there is to it. There's no secret. And unfortunately, it's not something that most people want to hear. But let me just show you something that no photographer will really show you. I'm going to show you what I used to shoot like 10 years ago. So you understand how bad it would be. Uh, Sorry, guys, I can't look right into the camera because if I look into the camera, I can't look at my presentation. So it's a little difficult. Like I said, I'm figuring this out. But hey, so this is my journey through photography. So this is way back in 2008 and 2009. I shot this photo. Some of you might recognize it. This is in Rishikesh. This is surprisingly at point at which I thought I actually knew what I was doing. I thought I was actually decent at photography. No, I was not, but this is what I used to shoot, and I had that false sense of confidence that comes from ignorance. This is my first wedding that I ever shot. This is a friend's wedding that I shot way back in 2009. I feel embarrassed to even show this because I feel bad for them that I wasn't I wasn't at a skill level where I could do justice to the wedding. At that time, though, I thought I did a good job. This is another photo that I shot way back in 2009. It's just an awful photo. There's no sense of light. There's no sense of composition. If a student showed this to me today, I would just destroy this photo. I wouldn't be very kind about this because it belies a lack of understanding and a lack of effort, so on and so forth. I'm embarrassed. But so if all the people who knew me from college, some of my classmates, my school classmates have actually joined the stream. If you ask them if they thought that I would ever be a photographer, be related to art in any way 10, 15 years ago, they would have just laughed in your face. They would have laughed in my face too. But the only difference between doing stuff like this and doing stuff which is a little better. So this was shot in 2013. So as I decided to just stick to it, I decided to just keep putting work into it. I never gave up. I decided to just keep shooting as much as I could until I got bored of it. And you know what? Surprisingly, I never really got bored of it. Uh, it gave me insight into the world. It made me just generally a more understanding person as well. But here's the deal. The only difference from the person who was shooting that 9 years ago and the person who's shooting that 3 or 4 years later is time and practice. And that's basically it. So that's the big secret about photography, right? The more you practice, the more you work, the better you will be. Of course, there are some things which are easier if someone tells you how to do those things, which is why I'm here. But there are a lot of things that you can learn by yourself. So I'm just going to go through this presentation quickly and then get to the important bits of it. So there's learning how to learn photography, which I think is a really important part of the introduction of what we're talking about. So the most important thing I've learned about learning photography is learning how to fail. So by learning how to fail, I mean, how do you how do you learn everything from every failure? Why do you want to learn photography? This is also really important. It's not a rhetorical question. It's a question you should definitely ask yourself. Why do you really want to learn photography? Um, and it's a different answer for everyone. So for me, uh, I learned photography because it was just something that was my father used to be really interested in it. I could never figure it out. I didn't understand why he'd spend so much time and energy like walking around with an old film camera. And he had a little camera like this. So he had something like this. This is a Nikon FM2. Sorry, I'll just put it in front of the camera so you can see it. So this is an old film camera. So he used to use this and he used to take it on family vacations all the time. So over time, I think that just rubbed off for me, and I decided to pick it up as a hobby, and I fell in love with it. So that is the reason and my motivation for picking up the skill. You might have your own reasons. You might have children at home that you love and want to document their lives and make sure it's documented in the best possible way. You might like traveling and you want to make sure those memories are captured. You might want to be a professional photographer, share other people's memories. These are all valid reasons, but it's important to at least internalize the reason why you do something. The other important thing is what stops you from learning this yourself. So a lot of people over time have told me that, we need someone to tell us how to do something. No, you don't. And a lot of people have come to me saying that which camera should I buy to make my photography better? That's, in my opinion, and this is a really unpopular thing to say, that's the wrong approach. What you should be asking yourself is how can I improve my own skills, my innate skills, to improve my photography. The tools come later. The tools such as a camera, an expensive camera, that will solve the problem, but then it sends you in an endless spiral of buying new cameras and new equipment. And believe me, the world is going to change. buying new cameras, buying new equipment is going to be it's going to be far more difficult than it was before. Everyone's going to suffer through this. But no one can take away the things that you learned. No one can take away your knowledge. No one can take away your skills. People can take away your expensive camera and give you a cheap one, but you can still do well. So it's really important to be able to learn stuff by yourself and internalize. And why is photography important? Now, that's a really difficult question to answer, but I can answer it for myself, and everyone has their own answer. So, photography is important for me because it let me push past a lot of the social, not social, the mental boundaries and barriers I had for myself. I was not a very extroverted person. I like just sitting in front of a computer. Ironically, that's what I'm doing now, but I just didn't meet people, and I was afraid of social contact. Photography let me break through that barrier. It pushed me past that barrier. It was one of the terrible fears for me. What can photography do for you? Now, this is a tough question. So I can only answer this question for myself, but maybe some of this stuff will resonate. So photography has enabled me to see the world, basically. Uh, there are a lot of times I would not have gone to certain places without having the extra motivation of having my camera with me and to share something beautiful of the world. So this is a photograph I made. I actually went up in a little aeroplane for flying lessons in LA with a friend of mine. I think he's on the stream right now. Hey, Shobhan. So we went up there. I was just sitting in the back, almost like dying of air sickness with the camera jumping up in my hand. But the only thing I could think of was, oh my goodness, look at that. It's such a beautiful, beautiful image ready to be captured. So that's what it's done for me. It's allowed me to experience the world in a much more joyful way. This is another photo from an airplane. It's allowed me to meet and interact with people who I would have never done before. Like I said, I was very socially introverted. I still am, I believe, but just having the camera in front of me makes me a different person. Give me a camera and I'm suddenly brave. Give me a camera and I can talk to anyone. Give me a camera and I can meet people around the world, have a conversation with them, no matter who they are. Photography has allowed me to meet amazing people. So this is Ben Gibson. He's an incredible photographer, and honestly, he's a role model for me. Uh, and I only met him because of photography. I met him because he was attending a wedding that I was shooting, and we've become really good friends. He's an incredible photographer, and he's seen things which would make most of us, uh, pardon my French, would make most of us just shit ourselves. So it's he's an incredible fellow, and again, only through photography. It's allowed me to experience nature. It's allowed me to see things I would have never imagined seeing. So this is the aurora borealis captured in Alaska. In my wildest dreams, asked me 10 years ago, would I ever imagine seeing something like this? And I wouldn't have been able to. So this is what photography has done for me. It's allowed me to experience the world, to stop worrying, and learn to enjoy discomfort. So it's taken me out of my shell, allowed me to go to different places, and allowed me to experience nature in a completely unique way. So there are a lot of people who say, if you're a photographer and you take your camera, you don't really experience nature. You're too busy capturing it. So I find that slightly myopic. Uh, Only a photographer and all of you who shoot landscape photos or really interested in landscape photos know that we are just waiting for the right moment. I waited 2 hours in minus 25 degrees to get this photo. Whether it's a good photo or not, I had an amazing time just waiting and enjoying the the peace and quiet of that evening. And so photographers will have the patience to sit and wait, which is a really uncommon thing these days. Everyone's moving too quickly. Photography is going to allows me at least to take my time to pace myself and really enjoy the world around me, which I didn't earlier. So there's just some more photos. I'm going to get through this quickly because we have quite a bit to cover. And of course, I'll take questions after this part is done. So what should you know, in my opinion, to be a reasonably well-rounded photographer? What are the essential skills that you need to know? So the technical skills, the aesthetic skills, and then most importantly, the mindset of it all. So the mindset is really, really important. And we'll get to that part of it, which I think it's the most important stuff. So the camera basics, and all the camera basics. We're going to cover all of this in Photography 101. So camera controls, lenses, shooting practices, understanding exposure, composition. I didn't write it here, but we're going to understand composition. That's under aesthetics, but we're going to do that too. Right? So all this stuff is going to be covered under what we call basics. We are also going to be talking about post-processing. So post-processing, I also consider post-processing an essential skill. Post-processing is giving the final touches to your vision. The entire photographic process does not end when you press the shutter button. It does not end when a picture comes on the back of your screen. In my opinion, that's just the beginning, right? That's where your other skills kick in, your post-processing skills to give life to your vision. So, and a lot of people have this misconception that post-processing is a new thing just because we have Photoshop and Lightroom. No, it's not really a new thing. Photoshop and Lightroom have made it easier for us to do it. So I'm just going to show you a really interesting little photo here. So this is an image shot by Richard Avedon. Look him up. Incredible photographer, of course, passed away many years ago. Uh, this is each one of those red marks that you see with a plus 20, plus 40, all those marks, those indicate dodging and burning. And those days on film, you had to do it manually. You had to do it through actual physical tools. You didn't have, of course, Photoshop to do it. But this is the level of correction that happened even on a film photograph, not even digital. So this is what people were doing, and this is in the 40s, right? So post processing has been is an intrinsic part of photography, and it's been there for a very long time. There's, of course, understanding light. So we're going to be talking about about lighting in another session. So I'm even going to be putting up the entire Shutter School course content on flash photography. I'll be putting that up in the next few weeks. It depends on how long we're all stuck together, but okay, so it'll all be online soon enough. All right, so now how do you get better? Right? This is what I've learned about how you get better as a photographer, and this is really, really important. So some people on the chat, sorry, I can't keep up with the chat and talk at the same time, but I saw a couple of questions come in the chat about the feedback system. So we'll get to that. So here's the harsh reality of photography, right? The only differences between a mediocre photographer and a good photographer, I'm not even saying great, I'm saying good. And I consider myself to be good, not great. I don't think I'll ever think of myself as a great photographer. But I think of myself now as getting to the edge, it's the very edge of being good. So if I can take anything away from it, it is the unwillingness to give up or quit in the face of harsh criticism. That's been super important, and it's very valuable. I've had friends of mine who I truly value tell me that that some photos I've shot are absolutely rubbish. Now, the wrong way to take this would be to say, "Oh my God, I suck. My life is over. I'll never be good." The right way to take it is, "Okay, I respect your opinion. You're my friend. Obviously, I have to respect your opinion. Uh, Let me figure out how to do it better next time." So that's I believe the right approach to this, and constantly challenging yourself to produce better work. We get stuck in a groove, and I'll talk about that in a bit. We get stuck in a groove really easily, just to stick to what's comfortable. But instead of that, just challenge yourself to do a little better than you did last time. Try something new. Try a different technique. Try something that will just improve your photography 1%. 1% every few days over a year means a lot. It means you'll be an order of magnitude better by the end of the year. Knowing that talent without the work behind it is basically wasted. You can be the most talented person on earth. It's all wasted unless you put in the effort. Hard work is going to beat talent every single time. A person who goes out and shoots every day is always going to be producing better work than someone that sits at home and just reads f-stoppers all day. Right? So it doesn't matter. Failing forwards is simple. You make a mistake, learn from it so that next time you do it, you move ahead, right? That's all it means. So we always attempt to fail forwards. We don't fail backwards in the sense that we don't fail and think, oh my God, I suck and I'm not going to do this anymore. We don't give up, right? So if you want to get better, and this is true for many things, I'm just using it in the context of photography because that's what I know. I don't know many other things, but I do know this, right? So this is really important. All right, so here's the other controversial part. Photography is easy. And sorry, my face is blocking some of that presentation. Most of the technical aspects of photography are super simple, super simple. You don't need a long course to understand it. Most of the stuff, you're literally at the end of Photography 101, which is at the end of 8 sessions. You'll pretty much know whatever you need to know to get started and to make great photos. Anything technical that you need to know, you will know by the end. It's up to you to practice it, but the knowledge is already going to be there. After the knowledge, it's a matter of practice. It is just like someone telling me I play tennis now. So I play tennis. I'm terrible at it, but I do play for staying fit. So, or rather, trying to become fit. I'm not fit, but hey. So I know theoretically how to hit a forehand. It's very difficult to actually do one under pressure and when you're on the field. The only way you can that you can actually hit one is if you practice, right? So that's basically the difference. Be persistent, practice constantly, always try to be better. We talked about this. And this is the really important part. There's a lot of negativity and misinformation in the photography community. There are some great photographers, some of them who are on the stream right now, who are always encouraging, always patient, and willing to answer all your questions. So those are good people to talk to. But there's the other side of it, which is there'll be photographers who'll say, you know what, if you can't shoot your camera in like manual mode, you suck. You're not a photographer. Whenever you hear that, I encourage you to take a step back and figure out why that person is saying something like that. There is no reason for anyone to say that unless they want to show their own sense of superiority. Dogma repeated without justification or support. So some people will say only shoot manual mode. Why do you only shoot manual mode? The conversation will kind of end there, right? Just do it because I'm saying so. That's an argument from authority. Ignore those arguments. If someone can't justify their position, I just ignore their position. Right? I need to know to a decent degree why I'm doing something. And I encourage you to also ask that question. Ask that question of me also, and I'll answer it to the best of my ability. If you don't like my answer, you're free to not listen to me. That's how this works. That's how it should work. And the last part of it is poor feedback. So what do I mean by poor feedback? There's a different level of poor feedback that we'll get to after this. But poor feedback is feedback that does not give you any positive information about how to improve. So if I see a photograph and I say, hey, this photo sucks, and that's the end of it, that's poor feedback. Why is it poor? It doesn't give me, the student, any way of improving it besides I suck, right? That's not valuable. What is valuable, and I encourage you when you're giving feedback to people who don't know as much as you, to also say that, hey, these parts of this photo, you did a good job here. These are the aspects of the photo which do not work, and here's how you could possibly improve them. So feedback should always include a path to improvement. Without the path to improvement, feedback doesn't really have any value, right? It's just words. It's not actionable. So we need feedback to be actionable. Okay, I'm going to skip this. There's just a lot of text. I'll send this out in the group. Where do you learn? All right, so now this is tough. So where do you learn? Online learning, in my experience, is a bit of drinking out of a fire hose situation. There's just a lot of information, sometimes contradictory information. And always remember, when you're learning stuff of something like YouTube, you'll notice most of the content on YouTube is tech reviews. Why? Because people respond to incentives. The incentive for making a video on YouTube is the views. It's not the teaching. Remember this. It's to get views. If you're trying to get views, what is the most simple way of doing it? Make it controversial and make it attractive, right? So these things are not, they may not be orthogonal to the idea of learning, but they're definitely not aligned with the idea of learning. So just be aware of it. The other dangerous thing is everyone is an expert. Everyone online is an expert. Everyone knows something. Yes, but like Dash said in The Incredibles, right? If everyone is special, then no one is, right? So be very wary of a deluge of experts. And the internet in general is a minefield of exploration. So I just spent a minute or two just putting together. So these are all the things I found out. There are some great resources online. They require a little more effort to learn. So the more, and I'll put a list of the resources up on Facebook, so you can just click in and look at those. A lot, and my favorite resource for learning stuff online is Cambridge in Color. It's a great website. No videos, it's all text, but it's very old school that way. But I've learned most of my fundamentals. Most of my fundamentals got firmed up by reading Cambridge in Color. It's a great website. I'll put a link on it in the notes later. All right, so this is my favorite quote about learning in general by Gary Kasparov. Each success is being like, so to give context about this quote, it's a quote about how Gary Kasparov realized he was not improving as much as he wanted to in chess. This is from a really great book of his called Deep Thinking, which I read last year, I think. Each success is like being dipped in bronze over and over again. Each success and each layer made me more and more rigid and unable to change or see the need for change. So what this means is if all you get is success, if all you get is constant feedback saying you're good, there's no incentive for you to get better. There's no incentive for you to change. So this brings me to the next point, which is using social media for feedback. Social media is a terribly dangerous place for feedback. Notice there's no dislike button on Facebook. Notice there's only a heart button on Instagram. Notice that any comment you get, no matter how good or bad a photo you post on Instagram, will be yes, good, fire, amazing, right? Very rarely will you get people taking the time to put meaningful feedback into this. And why is that? It's because the system, the social media system, disincentivizes um, honest feedback. If you say something bad about someone's photo, everyone will see it and you will feel bad. So you also don't give honest feedback. So this is the problem. Social media is like those layers of bronze which will accumulate over you. Everyone will just say good things about you. Everyone will just say good things about your photos. And then you will never have the incentive to get better, right? I encourage you, instead of using social media as a feedback, talk to your friends, talk to people who know, talk to people, photographers you respect. Have them give you feedback and have them give you honest feedback about your photos. That's the way to get better. The hunt for likes. This is, I think, the most criminal thing of our times. Our incentive systems for improvement have become so perverse that all we want is positive reinforcement. The world does not work. Human beings, after a while, will become immune to positive reinforcement. We won't be able to get enough of it, right? And it will put us in this endless spiral of just doing just enough work to get likes, and it's not okay. Uh, be If you want to get better at an art, be ready to be hurt a little bit. That's how it works. That's how you get better. Worry about the tools rather than the art. I have a fancy camera. This is going to make me a better photographer. No, it's not. It's not going to make you a better photographer. It'll make you a person with a better camera, right? So don't worry about the tools. Worry about learning the skills. Worry about the stuff that can't be taken away from you. These are your fundamental rights. This is the fundamental aspect of you being a human being. You learn something and no one can take it away from you. They can take your camera. They can't take away your knowledge, right? And the last thing that you should not do is become an island. And this I've learned personally. Photography sometimes is a really solitary art. We work by ourselves. We use ourselves as a feedback system. We do everything for ourselves. This is a mistake. There is strength in community. There's strength in being with a group of people who are like-minded, who encourage you, who help you go out. So I've been uh, it's been an honor to be a part of a really big photography community in Pune called Photographers of Pune. Some of you guys, I think Soumitra, or some of you people are on here right now. It's really important to be a part of this community. This will give you encouragement when you're down. You will be able to encourage other people. You will be able to positively reinforce other people's ideas. And in general, they're just a fun bunch of people to hang out with. I would not be anywhere near as good as a photographer I am now without this group being in my life. I joined this group thanks to Nikhil, who was on the stream. I think it was way back in 2009, 2010, and it completely changed the way I thought about photography and the way I thought about community. So they're on Facebook. If you're in Pune and want to join a fun photography club, please join. They're a great bunch of people. Okay, so now I'm going to get to what the point of the course was, which is the history of photography. But before that, I'm going to take a couple of minutes. We're just halfway through. I'm going to take a couple of minutes to answer questions that I see on the stream. Let me have a look. All right. So Shobhan says, what if it's really hard to articulate what's good or bad? So that generally happens, especially in artistic endeavor, because you don't have the vocabulary to express something. So even now, the language I speak may be insufficient to explain why something is good or bad. But I can try my best. I can say that maybe this could have been better, maybe you can't. Or you could just say that, hey, you know what? I just don't know. I think it's bad. I just don't know why. I'm sorry that I don't like it as much as I should, but something about it bothers me, and I just don't have the vocabulary to express it. So that I feel that's a very valid expression of feedback as well, right? So, all right, let's go. Anand says that he did a walk with 500 pics and it was awesome fun. Yeah, so photo walks are great, right? It lets you meet really good new photographers and you can interact with them. You maybe will find someone who does the same thing that you like to do. And if that's the case, you'll have an amazing time. That's why I like meeting in person for this kind of stuff. It's a lot harder to do this stuff online. Meeting together, even having for example, Photographers at Pune has an exhibition that they throw every year. We have thousands of people. There are thousands of people attending it. Now, more than the people attending it, it's great to interact with people in person. That's really important. Getting in-person feedback, getting their responses in real time, rather than being filtered by social media. Social media is one of the most dangerous filters you can have for feedback. It will cut away anything which is even remotely negative. Negative does not mean bad. Negative just means, hey, I didn't like this. I didn't like all of it. There's some things which you could get better. No one's perfect. There's some things which should be better. So social media removes that aspect of it and only reinforces the part where saying, okay, I know this is a terrible photo, but man, I feel scared to say something bad about it because if I say something bad about it, this person is going to completely destroy my photos. So now it's no longer a system of positivity. It's a system based on fear. It's a fear of getting bad feedback, which is why you don't give bad feedback, right? So you can see why the system fails. All right. So we are going to get started in a couple of minutes. I'm just going to wait a couple of minutes. Does anyone have any questions? Please put them on, and I'll try my best to answer. So someone's asking whether this is being recorded. Honestly, I have no idea. This is the first time I'm doing this. I think it's being recorded. We'll find out when it's over. But hey, you know what? I'll just put the presentation up for people. Maybe I'll do it again in a couple of weeks. Don't worry about missing out on it. I don't have any FOMO about this presentation. We'll do it again. I can go over it again. You have any questions, you can reach out to me either here or on Instagram, wherever you want to. Um, so Vinayak says, what's the best way to tackle negative feedback? So that's a really good question. Uh, So the best way to tackle negative feedback is to remember the feedback is about what you created. It's not about you, right? The best way I've realized, uh, first of all, is to grow a thick skin, right? So just remember when I see a when I see a photo and I say, you know what, this photo is not good. I am not saying that you are not good. I am not saying that your skills are insufficient. I'm not saying that all the time and energy you spent learning this is a waste. I'm saying that in this particular instance, you could have done better, right? So that's how you should also accept it. In the sense that if someone says, hey man, this photo is not good, I was like, oh damn, okay, I thought it was good. Can you tell me why you don't think it's very good? And the person will very honestly tell you why. And I'll say, interesting. So these are things I need to keep in mind next time, right? This is the feedback I need, and I will not. It's not a strike against my ego. You leave ego at the door. Ego is out of the equation. Ego is the thing which is going to stop you from getting better and better at this, right? So leave your ego out of it and accept the feedback as being given generously to you. It's a gift. Feedback, negative feedback is also a gift given to you. You know what gift that person has given to you? He's given the gift of you getting better. He's given you, he or she has given you a gift of you getting better at something. So um, Swapnil has said that can we get a list of great photographers? So that's really interesting, Swapnil. So what I'm going to be doing is I also have a series of presentations of great photographers that I admire, and I made presentations which go over why I think their work is good and why you should appreciate their work. So I'll be going over those presentations too. Pranay is saying, can I get a chance to interact with you in person? I don't want to get a virus, man. So maybe after like 6 months. Nilima, how much is the session? Well, the session is going to end by 12. It's a 1 hour session. We do 1 hour sessions. Omkar asks, can you become a good photographer with something like an 11 Pro Max? So an 11 Pro Max is actually an extraordinarily good camera. I thought you were going to say something like an iPhone 5, but yeah, it's a great camera. If, like I said, at that point, the camera is not going to be your problem. Your creativity and your vision is going to be the problem. Ava is asking us about for photo appreciation. Yes, we are actually going to do that. I have presentations for photo appreciation too. Can't do it in photography 101, but definitely, definitely part of the curriculum. Yogendra makes a really good point, which is that don't try and learn this all in a year. It's a really valid point. What I'm doing now is to give you a kickstart, right? To show you why I love this so much and why I think everyone should be a hobbyist. And there's a selfish reason for this too. The selfish reason is I like seeing good photographs. I love seeing beautiful photographs. The only way I can see beautiful photographs is if more of you people are creating good photographs. So get out there, make beautiful stuff so I can see it and enjoy it too. All right, just one more minute of questions. Nina is asking, will you be covering the flow for making the gigapixel photos that you post on Instagram? I could, I haven't thought about it yet. Anirudh's asking, how do you tackle people talking about techno things and photography, not photography as an art? So here's the real, Anirudh. You can't stop people from saying what they want to say, right? Even I've been very guilty of getting bogged down in very technical things. So find people who talk about photography as an art and interact with those people more than people who care about it as a technical exercise. Pranav is asking, I have a problem to spot Milky Way through app. Will you be including it? So I'm going to be doing a session with Deepak Tiwari soon uh, about deep sky astrophotography. So which is highly magnified photos of the night sky, which will probably solve your problem too. So we're going to be doing that as well. How do you tackle phases when you're completely not inspired? Oh, that's a rough one. So I know, like the Bible says, this too shall pass, right? Inspire, Inspiration's a sine wave. Sometimes it comes, sometimes it goes. But what I keep doing is I keep doing the work. I keep putting work behind what I'm doing. I shoot or edit something every day. So the discipline behind it will beat inspiration every time. Every single time. I may not be inspired, but I will not stop putting in the work. That's what I do. All right, guys. So I have to stop. I apologize. I have to stop the question and answers right now. We have to get through this, and we'll do more question and answers after the history of photography is done. Right. So let's get to it. History of photography. All right. So let's just start. Oh, shoot. Sorry. Give me a second. If I have seen a little further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. So that's Isaac Newton, and that's why I believe it's important for us to understand photography history, or to understand what came before us. So let's go and look at the history of photography. So I'm just going to skip past this. A lot of text which you don't really want to read. So the galloping, this is one of the most famous series of photos ever made. It's a galloping horse made in 1878. Before this photo was taken, people were not sure or would bet that a horse's legs don't touch the ground when it runs. And there was no way of telling. So for the first time in history, we could take a series of photos that actually demonstrated that a horse is actually flying through the air. So now why is that important? It shows that photography, even aside from the point of documenting stuff, allowed us to get an insight into the world which we did not have at all before this. So that's an important aspect of it. And this is an animated GIF of the horse running, and you can see the horse's legs are up in the air. So let's go way back into the history of photography, all the way back to 900 to 1000 AD, and we're talking about this gentleman here, Al-Hazan. Al-Hazan, one second, my presentation's acting up. Just give me one second. So Al-Hazan was a mathematician born way back in 965, and he wrote a book, and which is considered to be the seminal book about optics, called eponymously named the Book of Optics. And this, remember this is all the way back in 1000 AD. He documented and theorized certain phenomena such as the rectilinear propagation of light. We all remember this from physics, right? That's how you draw those little ray diagrams. Refraction, rainbows, and he's widely considered to be the father of optics. So a lot of the progress that we made today in optical science started with Al-Hazan. Let's go to the next slide. So if you want to get back to the real history of photography, right? Where does photography really start from? It starts from something called the camera obscura. So the camera obscura, Most of us have done this in either science projects or uh, in school, where we made a pinhole camera. So it's the same idea. A camera obscura. Now, for those of you who don't know, a camera in Italian. So notice the word camera is in there. Now, the word camera predates our cameras. So what does a camera really mean? The word camera in Latin means a room, and an obscura means a dark room. So that's literally what it means. So the camera obscura was basically a dark room with a little pinhole at the end of it, and a screen where you could capture the image. So it would create an inverted image of whatever was outside the pinhole. And this led people to go from making estimations of how life would look like, or unrealistic, not unrealistic, I'd say, but inaccurate representations of real life, into making pretty much line accurate representations of real life, such as this. So this is basically a tracing over a camera obscura. So basically they use the camera obscura to create an image on a wall, and they just put lines on it. They drew over it to get this particular image. And this is proportionate and accurate. It is line accurate. All the proportions are right, the perspective is correct, and all the person had to do is just trace over it. So this is a lot like all you engineers out there. You remember your first year of engineering where you did GTs for the glass tracings. So it's a similar concept. It's a similar concept to a glass tracing. So this is a somewhat more modern camera obscura or pinhole camera. You can see how the image of the light bulb is inverted and put into the back of the screen. Right. I'm just going to go ahead. Any questions so far about this? No questions. Great. Okay. So let's go to the fathers, or the pillars of our modern photography, or our understanding of photography. So this fellow right here, his name is Joseph Niepce, and he called this process heliography. So he's credited for being the person to first photograph to make the first modern photograph. So he used a very complicated and very inefficient technique to create the photograph, and this was done all the way back in 1828. Now let me just show you the photograph. Um, yeah. So this is one of the most famous photographs in history. This is called the view from the window at Legra. This is the view out of Joseph's window, and if you see, it's barely even recognizable as a photograph. That's because the materials he used, he was limited by the technology at that time of what he had. And the most interesting thing about this is, if anyone, I mean, I'm going to give you the answer right away anyway, but I want you to just think about how much time this photograph took to create. So we have our cameras which have 1 by 100, 1 by 200, 1 by 800 shutter speed, all the way to 1 by 8,000th of a second. Can anyone guess how long this photo would have taken to create? Anyone? Tick, tick one. So this photo took 8 hours to create. Why did it take so long? The light sensitive material that he used was not sensitive to light at all. It was a new technology for the time. So it took 8 hours to create this image. And of course, the resolution is extremely poor. But this is the start. Just see how things progress from here. This is the second pillar of photography. This is Louis Daguerre, and he is a French artist, photographer, inventor, and widely known for creation of what's called the daguerreotype, another photographic process. And he's credited for creating this image, the Boulevard de Temple. So, of course, I'm butchering the French language, so please excuse me. Why is this photo important? Why is this photo so important in photography? If you notice on the bottom left corner of the photo, there's a person standing there. This is the first documented photo of a living human being in history. So this is all the way back from 1838. Now you might wonder, why is that person visible and why do the streets look empty? That's because if you look really closely, that person is getting his shoe shined. There's a shoe shiner there and he's getting his boots polished. So he was standing there for a minute in that same position. Now the chemicals were better than the time that better than taking 8 hours, and you can easily see that the photograph is also improved. But it still took a few minutes to create this photo. So in those few minutes, these two people were the only people who stood still, and everyone else moved. So they're the only people who showed up in the photo, and now they're immortalized in history. Next, we're going to talk about a more controversial fellow. So this fellow, his name is Fox Talbot. So he is credited for creating what we think of as more modern photography, which is creating a negative and then creating a positive out of that negative. Of course, there's some controversy about him because uh, he essentially patented something which the French had already created at the same time, and they were giving it away for free. And he decided to patent it and make money for it, which led to a really weird and interesting situation where uh, in any in any British colony, which includes India, of course, at that time, you had to pay a license. You had to pay a license fee to use the French daguerreotype, but did not have to do it. Whereas it was free in any other non-British colonized country. So that is a really interesting and weird thing about this. So as I said, he's a somewhat more controversial figure in photography. So this is an example of his process. There's a negative image, what we remember as being negatives, and there's a positive created out of it. So this is Sir John F.W. Herschel. He's a scientist and astronomer who is credited for discovering the action of chemicals that are part of the photographic process. Now, why is he important? Why is he considered one of the other pillars of photography? The word photography was coined by Sir Herschel. So the terms photography, positive, negative, and all of the term photographic image, these are all coined by Sir Herschel. So he's the reason why we have the word photography at all. All right. So now let's fast forward. We're moving through time really quickly now. Now we're going to something called, we're at 1888, and George Eastman, the company later becomes Eastman Kodak, and then later Kodak, and now they're making a comeback again, but they had a really rough time in the middle. So they made the first roll film camera in 1888. So this is another pivotal moment. Now, why is that important? Before this, you had to take film in sheets and had to load it in sheets into the camera. There was no easy way of loading film into a camera. So the Kodak company revolutionized that, and they did it again later, which we'll get to. Another really incredible image. So this one is called the Tartan Ribbon. This was made in the late 1800s. This is the first color photo ever created. And how it's created is super interesting. Now remember this. There was no color film at this time. This is a complete black and white process. They had no way of capturing color images at that time. But somehow they managed to make this photograph. Now, how was this made? The idea for this was first proposed by James Clerk Maxwell, the incredibly famous and prolific physicist, and executed by a fellow named Thomas Sutton. Now, I want you to think about it. How could you make a color image when you can't really capture color? How is that possible when you only have black and white film? So I'm going to just show you very quickly how it is done. And this gives me a good opportunity to show off my virtual blackboard or my whiteboard. So this is the tartan ribbon. This is how the tartan ribbon was executed. So these are the same objects. Okay, so this is the same tartan ribbon. These three things are the same object, right? The same object was captured by a camera with a blue filter, a green filter, and a red filter. So you would get three different photographs out of it. A photograph, now ignore the colors. This is still a black and white photograph, but it's a black and white photograph shot through a blue filter. This is a black and white photograph shot through a green filter. And this is a black and white photograph shot through a red filter. So you have those three black and white photographs, which have different tonalities based on the filter. Now you've seen that in Lightroom or in editing tools too. You can use a software filter. You can use a red filter, green filter, blue filter on your photos, in your black and white photos. So then what they did is they took all three of those and they projected them through a projector which had a red filter, a green filter, and a blue filter in front of it to give you a color image. So this is how the tartan ribbon was created. So this is how this just speaks to the ingenuity of man, right? We have a black and white photographic process, but we still managed to get a color photo out of it. All right, let's move on. So now this is another revolution in the history of photography, the Kodak Brownie. So this is the first time the photographic process became accessible to people. Uh, the Kodak company, you can see it's a dollar, but this is a dollar in like the late 1800s, early 1900s. So it's a lot of money. They would give you a box, and it was basically a point and shoot. You pull the cord, you turn the key, you press the button, and you can shoot a photograph. You can't you can't develop this yourself. You would have to take the entire box and give it to the Kodak company. They would make a print for you and give you a box loaded with film again. So it's a tedious process, but that's the only thing they had that time. and they coined the point and shoot mantra, right? Which is you press the button and we'll do the rest for you. The only camera that anyone can use without instructions. Send for the primer for free, right? And this is all the Kodak Camera company. In 1900, they made the Kodak Brownie. This is the same camera, but they kept evolving it to make it better and better. Now we get to the really interesting part. Now we're really starting to speed up into camera development and photography development. So 1907 was autochrome. Autochrome was the first color film process, and this was one of the first images created by autochrome. In From 1909 to 1931, a very rich philanthropist banker named Albert Kahn decided to do something incredible and decided to do something that we as a human race should be honestly really grateful for. So he had a lot of money. He hired a bunch of photographers and he sent them all over the world to shoot photos of the world. So the result of that project was the archives of the planet. And these are photos all the way starting from 1909 to 1931, a lot of them shot in color, even more shot in black and white, about the state of the world in that time. And this is a time which was where, through a part of this, where the world was recovering from the Great War, the World War One, from 1917 to 1919. So it captures all of that. It captures, you can see, they even send photographers to India. They have the Rajas and the Sadhus in Japan, in Brunei, all over the world, in Mongolia. And here's the best part about the archives of the planet. The archives of the planet are now totally freely available online. You can go through them. You can see how much and how little the world has changed over the last, now it's almost 100 years. So we have photos going back 100 years, right? And there's something to be said about that. So we see the world as it was in that time in color. And the most amazing thing about it is you'd be shocked at how modern things look when they're shot in color. A lot of these photos will look like, and especially now with the new film Instagram filters where everything looks like old-fashioned film, you'd be shocked to see how modern those photos look now. It's amazing. I had a blast looking through all those old photos. All right, so now let's fast forward again. Let's go to 1913 and 1914 and till Leica. And Leica made the first 35 mm film camera. Now, what is 35 mm? 35 mm is a legacy that we're still dealing with today. We're still handling that legacy today. How? We have 35 mm SLRs. So this is a film SLR, which is a 35 mm SLR. Right? This is a Kodak FM2. This little guy uses 35 mm film, and this is from, I think this camera was made in the early 90s. We also have a modern camera. So this is my Nikon Z6. So this camera uses a 35 mm size sensor, which is called a full frame sensor. Now imagine that legacy is actually all the way back from 1913, so over 100 years. And we've been stuck with a 35 mm format. And why is it called 35 mm? People think that it's the width of the film or the length of the film. It's not either of those things because it's basically the width of the film strip, including the perforation. So that's 35 mm. And it's what we call a standard full frame size now. We have smaller sizes, which we call APS-C and crop, and I'm going to go through all of that when we talk about digital sensors. We won't be able to do it today, but we'll definitely be talking about it in detail. 1978, the first point and shoot autofocus camera. Now, this is important. Until now, you had to manual focus your cameras, and we had several tools to help us manual focus, including split prism, rangefinder, but this is the first autofocus point and shoot camera. 1981. 1981. This is almost 40 years ago. It's just a little younger than I am, right? So they demonstrate the first digital electronic still camera all the way back then. Incredibly difficult to use. It would write photos into a floppy disk, which is right next to it. It would maybe make 3 or 4 photos per floppy disk. And anyone who's been through the era of floppy disk, most of you are too young to remember how floppy disks were. They were the most unreliable, terrible medium you could find. I mean, you'd be lucky if a floppy disk would read 4 or 5 times before something went wrong with it. So it's just a really unpleasant time. 1991, Kodak released the first digital camera system. So now, what is this? This is hilarious, right? When you think about it, the system is not just the camera. If you notice, there's a wire connecting that gigantic box, which looks like an oscilloscope, and that's connected to the camera. So that big box was actually the processing unit required to interpret the data coming out of the sensor. So Kodak produced the sensor, and you could fit it into a Nikon body. You could fit it into a Nikon F2 or F3. I don't remember what camera that is, but you would need that entire system to be able to capture I think one megapixel image. And if anyone's curious about how much that cost, that unit would cost over $30,000 in that time, 1991 money, which makes it almost close to 80 or $90,000 now. Right? It's a ridiculous amount of money. It's 70, 80 lakhs almost to have that camera working. Apple released in 1994, 1996 an attempt to democratize the digital image making process with the QuickTake 100 camera. Didn't do so well. It's Apple, so it was fairly proprietary, wasn't very popular. Kodak in 1994, 1995 also came out with a digital camera. Now, notice how far ahead of the curve Kodak was. Kodak had stuff going all the way back to early 90s, digital cameras all the way back to the early 90s, but they never really capitalized. They they wanted to protect their film business more than they wanted to get on the boat with digital. They didn't see far enough ahead that digital is the future, everything is going to be digital now. But instead, what they did is very jealously protect their film camera business. And they had a 5 to 10 year head start on everyone, and they lost it. They squandered it. In the year 2000, something which would eventually revolutionize photography, and as some of you have already asked about, it was the first phone camera. And I know a lot of people have seen this one too. This was so popular when I was in college. I mean, if you were the coolest kid in college if you had this phone. Right? It was ridiculously expensive and it would take terrible photos, but it had a full color screen and it had a camera. Incredible. Then we go to the what I consider to be the next evolution. 2005, the EOS 5D from Canon. Now, before people say I'm a Canon fanboy, I shoot Nikon now, but I still think this was a revolutionary camera. Why was this revolutionary? It was the first full frame DSLR that was launched at a reasonable price. By reasonable, I mean in the $3,000 to $3,500 range. Before this, you'd have to pay up beyond $10,000 to $15,000 to get a full frame DSLR. The 5D is so good. It was so far ahead of its time that I saw wedding photographers use this camera all the way in 2012 and 2013. It was such a good camera. And it still produces really beautiful images. It was only 12 megapixels, but extraordinary images. All right, so this is my photography journey. This is what I started shooting with. So when I was a kid, when I was in school, I had that little Kodak KB10. Then my aunt, and this is what started off my journey through photography, which my aunt for some reason decided to give me the Sony Cybershot as a gift. So I had that little camera, and I could not stop shooting with it. I would just shoot constantly with it because before that I had to use film, and it would just take so much time and energy to use film. And now I had this little camera that could carry anywhere, take photos of friends, and it was just an incredible experience. And then that started me down this long and expensive path of photography. So then I got a Nikon D70, got some Canon SLRs, and now I'm back to Nikon. So it's come back to the process again. So now let's talk a little bit about the traditional darkroom. So the darkroom is basically how we used to function for 90% or 95% of for the whole of photography's history. So the idea of the negative is, so let me just pull up my whiteboard so you can see this. Give me a second. All right, so let's talk about the film photography process, right? So how does it work in digital? In digital, you have the camera, you capture the image goes inside a computer, it is processed and then exported to whatever medium you want. You could print it, you could do whatever you want with it. How does it work for film? So now film, you shoot it, then you have to develop it, then you have to print it. Okay, so these are the steps for this. Now this is very analogous to digital photography. So this part is the same. The role which is being played by the computer is now actually being done. The developing is being done by the computer. In film, you had to develop it with chemicals. and export as in you can export it, send it on the web or print it. And in film photography, you didn't have that option. You just had to print it. So now this looks very analogous, but now we come to the part of developing and printing, right? Now this part gets a little more complicated. So for developing, what you'd have to do is you'd have to extract the roll from the camera, right? This is the roll, right? You'd have to extract that from the camera. You'd have to load it into a device where you could put chemicals in it and process and develop it. Now this looks, I'm making it sound very trivial, but the chemical wash which had to be used, or which is still being used, we still do this today. I have actually been shooting a lot of film photography right now, so I'm becoming more familiar with the process. So this needed to be washed with developing chemicals, right? And these developing chemicals had to be the developing process needed timing. You could affect the photographic process by changing the timing, right? And the timing is determined by the temperature of the chemicals and the concentration of the chemicals, right? So you had to time with a stopwatch how long the chemicals were going to be interacting with the film. After it was done, you had to stop the interaction using a stop path, and then you had to wash the film, and that would give you one negative. That would give you one film negative. Let me just show you what that looks like. So I have some negatives from a medium format camera which I use. Let me just show you that properly. Right. So I hope my camera focuses. It's not focusing on this. Let me try a little bit. Yeah, there you go. So that's that's a negative, and this is a negative strip, right? This is what it looks like. So this is the end production of that step, of the step which we just talked about. So you get this, you get this, and you get a developed negative, right? This is the negative. Now the negative has to be put into, if you look at the presentation, on top you see that little device which has a white screen next to it. So that's an enlarger. So in that enlarger, you had to put photosensitive paper, and you project the image through the negative onto the photosensitive paper, and that's how you would make a print. And all of this has to be done. So the development process has to be done in pitch darkness or inside a special box, a chemical box, which holds the film without any light getting into it. The printing process can be done in red light. So, which is why when you see all those old-fashioned films where they're doing developing in red light, that's wrong. That can't work. Right? It would spoil the film. But you can print in that light because the paper is not sensitive to red light. And we are talking only about black and white printing, which is a little simple. Right? So that's how long it would take for you to even make a single print, one print. Right? If you got all the developing right, you could still screw up the printing. Right? You could still make a terrible mistake with the printing, and you'd have to start all over again with the printing. And every time you print and make a mistake, you'd waste a piece of paper. Right? So that's how the process used to be. Now, if you look at the workflow, it's basically the same. The only difference is this part of it takes no time at all now. And this part of it, which is preparing something to print, just takes very little time. So all the changes we've done from going from digital film have been to make it easier and more convenient to shoot. And we should be thanking our stars we are actually in this time where it's so easy to shoot. It's become very easy to shoot photos, and we should be grateful for that. You can see how painful this process is. That's not to say the film process was not rewarding. I find it extremely rewarding, which is why I'm shooting film again. But now we're in the digital era, and the digital era allows us to shoot without spending money on chemicals, without spending money on paper, which is a blessing. And now we're in the era of digital cameras, right? Every camera has a digital sensor in it. There are different kinds of digital sensors. We'll get into that in depth. And this is the history of the digital camera and the digital sensor. Now, the rest of this presentation is extremely technical, so I am not going to do this right now. I'm going to leave this for later, and we'll talk about when we talk about digital sensors in general. What I like to do right now is to answer any questions that you guys have about the presentation today, and then we'll move ahead from there. And I'll give you an idea of what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks. All right. So, all right. So let's yeah, Sarvesh, you're right. I was talking about Kodak and I called it a Kodak instead of a Nikon FM2. Yeah, this is a Nikon FM2, not Kodak. So, hey, let me just make myself a little larger on the screen so that everyone can see. All right, guys. So I have time for your questions. Any other questions you may have? Uh, Let me just pull up the stream. So Aditya is asking that these negatives are colorless. This negative is colorless. How is this printed in color? Well, this is actually a black and white negative. Oh, let me just put that in front of you so you can see it. Oh, it's not focusing. There you go. So this is actually a black and white negative. I don't have any color negatives to show you because I don't shoot color film. It's a much more complicated process, and very few labs in India right now do color film. Whereas my black and white stuff, my friend Kaustubh Khare very generously develops all our film, so we can do black and white film really easily. So that's the problem with the color process. Um, Aditya asked me what made me decide to shift from Nikon to Canon. Well, at that time, Canon had the only reasonably priced full frame SLR, which is the 5D Mark II, and that's why I shifted. Now I shoot Nikon again. And honestly, in all of that, I've realized that I was stupid. It didn't make any difference. Right? I could have just shot with whatever I was shooting and I would have been fine. Because the thing which I was the thing which I was lacking. See, the reason why people keep having all these clickbait YouTube videos about, hey, I'm selling everything and buying Sony, hey, I'm selling everything, buying Nikon, all of this, it's to make you guys buy cameras. It doesn't matter to them. It's so that you buy cameras using their Amazon affiliate links, right? They're trying to get you to spend money, that's their incentive. Whereas you should be thinking it from a different way. Why do I need a new camera? What can I do with a new camera that I cannot do right now? Right? That's a question you should ask yourself. And if you're really, really honest about it, you will find out that there are very few reasons to answer positively to that question. Right? So just be really careful about that. All right. Hey, Yogendra has very helpfully posted the whole Albert Kahn collection. Thank you for that. Yeah. So everyone can have, I'm just going to pin Yogendra's comment here so that you can all see it. Please have a look at the archives of the planets. It is an incredible thing to see how the world was. All right, so Vinayak is asking which is better, film camera photography or digital photography. So let me just say that they're different. Let me just say that they're completely different. There are some ways in which, very few ways in which film is better. But in my opinion, most of those things are overwhelmingly taken, they are overwhelmingly beaten by the convenience of digital. But there is one thing, there is one reason where film is always going to be digital, always. So you see this piece of film. Now, this piece of film is relatively new. This was shot 2 years ago, right? I still have this, it's in perfect condition, this can be printed. This film, if I keep this carefully, will last 100 years, right? And after 100 years, your great grandchildren can take this piece of film, put it in an enlarger, and get a print out of it, or scan it with something, get a print out of it. How many of you can say the same thing for digital photos even 10 years old? Do you still have 10-year-old photos? You don't. So that's the thing about film. Film is essentially timeless. You keep it well. Let's imagine like we're in the era of a pandemic, right? So it seems so strange to even say that, but we're living in a pandemic. Uh, if we lost all power, all electricity, everything, I could still just hold this in front of light and still see a photo. I can't do that with a digital camera, right? So that's why I think it's important. So Prachati is asking how they project those three ribbon photos to achieve the result that you show. All right, so they put a projector, which means basically a big box which projects light out of it. They put the negative in front of it, and then they put a red filter, green filter, and blue filter in front of three different projectors. And they aim the projector to the same place, right? If you look at old airplanes, right? Let me see if I can show you old airplane projectors. Let me see if I can pull that up. Give me a second. So, I'm just going to quit out of my presentation. Let me see if I can find what I'm talking about. Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. Let me just see if I can put it on this screen. All right, sorry, just give me 1 second. I'm just going to show you this. Right? So this is an old airplane projector. Now this is how this was done before, right? You would have different colors going through each one of those things, and you would get a color image out of it. So it's a similar concept to this. Just pull this back. All right. Now going back to this. All right. Oh shoot! Now how do I get back to the comments? All right, here we go. Okay. So this is all the way back. How do you overcome a phase where you think none of your photos are coming out good enough? So I think of it as a more positive thing. Pratik is asking that question. I think of it as a positive thing. If you think your photos suck, there's one really big positive takeaway from it. It means that you're at this Goldilocks zone, right? You're at this zone where you know what is good and you know what's bad, right? So your ability to understand what good and bad is has improved. It's improved so much that you think your own stuff is bad. The worst place to be is if you think that your stuff is amazing when it's actually not. If you think your stuff is bad, that means your taste, that means your ability to recognize what's good and bad is beyond your skill level. Now, when it's beyond your skill level, it gives you the opportunity to try and get those two things closer. So there's your vision and there's your skill. Now your vision is far in excess of your skill. So now you have a pathway to get your skill up to your vision and then go on. And it'll be a leapfrog. It'll always go up and down. Right? So it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And just always think of it as a good thing. If you think that you're stuck. All right, let's go. Let's go. Let's look at more questions. Um, and there's so many questions. This is going to take me a while to get through. Uh, Someone's asking, can you interact with me on Instagram? Sure. Yeah. Send me a friend request. Send me a message. If I see it, I'll answer. Um, is this how RGB came in when you showed that? I'm not sure about that, but let me look into this. Parag is asking that question. Let me look into it, and I'll answer that question in the next session. Hmm. Someone's asking about please advise on editing. We're doing a whole session about editing. We'll get to it later. Sharvesh says, what do you think about Pentax? My dad used to shoot a Pentax. I think it's a good company, but they're really suffering now. Uh, Dr. Mamani says the first flash photograph was also by James Clerk Maxwell. I did not know that, so that's another interesting bit of trivia for me. Abba asking a really good question. Would people physically burn and dodge on film? And the answer to that is yes. And you would use tools to do that. Let me just show you. Let me show you some tools for that. I'm just going to take a browser window and put it up here for everyone to see. Right? If you look at this, you will see how this was done. Let's put it up on a browser window. So if you look at this is a really tiny image, but let me see if it shows up properly. Oh, it's gone to a Wikipedia page. Okay, yeah. So this is basically how dodging and burning was done. right? So what you do is the photo paper on top. So you'd have the image of the negative, and you'd let more light go through the negative for burning, right? Because it's a negative. And if you want to do the opposite, you would block the light from the enlarger, and that would be burning. So it was possible to do dodging and burning in film too. It was just incredibly painful. It was so painful to do it. Yeah, so we have Kaustubh on the comment thread right now. And Kaustubh is the man for film photography. If you have any film related questions, he's the guy to ask. He takes care of all my film related questions. Hmm. Okay. Hemant says, please warn people about the rabbit hole they're about to enter. Before shutter school, I thought my 60D and Tamron lens was the end game. Now, thanks to you guys, I discovered primes. So there's a really, I like to twist a really famous and really funny story, right? How do you stop your children from getting into drugs, right? You get them into photography and they'll have no money to buy drugs. Right? This is the reality of photography. Once you go down the rabbit hole of buying shit, now it never ends. You're going to land up buying so much stuff that you won't have money for anything else. All right, all right. Piyush asks, how many times can we use negatives to print? Piyush, like I said, you can print as long as the negative is still readable. So as long as you have a sort of visual, as long as you can see the negative clearly, you can print it. It just won't be a great print, but you can definitely print it. Aditya asks, I heard there's a museum of old cameras in Pune. Honestly, I don't know. Aditya Tilekar says, so negatives of color photos are not black and white? Nope, they're not black and white. You can easily see that they're color. I don't have any color negatives to show you, but you can just Google it. You'll notice that they're color. Dr. Mamuni says, remember burning a print for 5 minutes long. It was a real testing time. Yeah, I was uh, I was trained briefly in Ferguson College, thanks to Dr. Mamuni and Manish and a few other members of staff in darkroom dodging and burning. Let's just say it was not fun. I got out of there and started shooting digital as quickly as I could. Uh, okay, are there any more questions? So we can wind this down. We'll wind this down in the next 5 minutes. Uh, I hope you had a good time in the session. I am just going to put up the next part of the session, the course outline again, so you can have a look. Just put the course outline. All right, Dr. Mahmooni said there's a camera museum by Mr. Farid Sheikh. So I've pinned that comment here so you can look it up. And once all the craziness of the pandemic is done, you should definitely visit. I was asking, can you discuss some non-technical history of photography in certain sessions? Yes, definitely. That's going to be the mini sessions that I do in between these. So, by history of photography. So, the history of the photography is a history of the non-technical history of photography is the history of its practitioners or the people who contributed most to the aesthetic growth of photography. So, I have some presentations ready, which I'll share with you. I have a bunch of photo books that I can share that I can post that you can look at. So I feel like this is a great book. I'm just putting it up on screen right now. So this is one of my favorite books. It's a great first book if you want to understand the non-technical history of photography. So these are great photographers. This is Life magazine used to be the seminal place for viewing great photography, just like National Geographic is right now. Um, This has a bunch of the most amazing old photographs that you'll see, and technically beautiful photographs as well as aesthetically beautiful photographs. So there's some beautiful prints in here, and also some really influential photographers mentioned in there as well as some of their work. Okay, and let's look at more questions. I'm glad to see a lot of your volunteering your time and energy to help people with photography. Sarvesh has a bunch of old cameras that you can have a look at once we can actually meet in person again. Um, what else? Oh, I didn't know, Webber, that you were joining from the US. I'm glad you could make it. I'm sorry for keeping you up so late. Lilesh is asking me, can you please discuss macro photography and how to help prepare an endless wish list? So here's the deal. I don't do macro photography. It would be remiss of me to pretend to be an expert in macro photography. On the other hand, I am going to be, you're in for a treat later. I'm planning something where we will have a macro photographer on board for one of these sessions. Yogendra, who's an expert macro photographer, he'll come in, he'll talk to you about technique, what you need, and Yogendra's fantastic. His name is Yogendra Joshi. You can follow him on Instagram. He has the ability to make amazing macro photographs with using very little money and very basic equipment, and you'll be amazed at what he can create. Tushar has posted. I don't know if that's the same one. I'll have a look and confirm. So Swapna is asking where I can find this book. So The Great Life Photographers, I bought this on Amazon. This is the second time I had to buy this copy. I gave the book away as a gift to a friend of mine. But now I liked it so much I bought a second copy for myself. I actually have a huge number of really, really good books, good photography books. I've made it a habit of buying a book every month for the last more than a month, more than one book a month for the last year or so. So I have some great books. This one is a really beautiful book of portraits by Raghu Rai, and a bunch of other books. So books are great. I can give you a great recommendation. Okay. What else? What else? What else? What are the comments do we have? What other questions do we have? Vaibhav's asking how to build a good kit in terms of lenses. So, oh man, Vaibhav, that's a really tough question because it just depends on what kind of photography you do. So, good kit depends on it depends on your budget. It depends on the kind of photography you do. So, what might work for you might not work for someone else. So, it's a conversation we can have when I discuss lenses. If you look at the course material, there's an entire section just on lenses. Right? Oh, okay. So let me just go back to my whiteboard so we can talk about other questions. All right. So now, importantly, the next session. All right. The next session is understanding exposure. Right. And this session will be conducted on the 26th of March, again at the same time, 11 a.m. Right. So Shobhan's asking about photography burnout. So here's the deal. I don't really ever get burnt out on it. It's because I've learned to temper my expectations, right? I don't expect myself to create something beautiful every single time. I don't expect myself to create anything meaningful every single time. I just I just shoot. If I'm feeling burnt out, I just won't shoot for that day. If or for how much ever time. But I'll read about it. I'll keep in touch with the subject some way or the other. Uh, if you feel like you shot too much and you don't want to shoot, it happens to me after a wedding season, right? I feel like, oh my God, I don't want to shoot anymore. But that doesn't stop me from loving photography. So I still love the art. So I'll read about something else to do with photography. So, for instance, Deepak Tiwari, who will be on our session sometime soon about astrophotography. After the wedding season, he and I were just discussing deep sky astrophotography, which is a completely different form of photography from weddings, from documentary. And it was just a really interesting thing to work on, and he's produced some beautiful images about of deep sky astrophotography. So if I get burnt out, photography has endless avenues for you to stay interested. It's not fixed. It's not just one form of photography. You can always try something different. So Tejas asking, can you ping some book names here? I am going to post the book names here very soon. So you'll be able to see a list of books that I recommend. I'll give you a book every session that you can refer to. I don't want to give you everything at once because that will be a little difficult. Okay. Um, okay, what else? Can we get the PowerPoint presentation in the future? Yes, but I don't think there's much meaning behind getting the PowerPoint presentations. The PowerPoint presentations were created to be spoken to. They're just basically slides. I don't know how much value there'll be just looking at photos, right? So probably not. I'm hoping that Facebook Live records these sessions so that you can look at them later. Um, okay, so just 1 minute more of questions and then we'll wind down for the day. I would really, really appreciate your feedback um, about the session and how you enjoyed it. And before I end the session, I would be remiss by not thanking Suhas. So a lot of this content was created by Suhas when we were both part of something called Shutter School. So together we created a bunch of this content that you're viewing now. Of course, we had to stop Shutter School because we both ran out of time. But I think the legacy of that entire activity was that we have some beautiful presentations. Oh, okay. So I can save the presentation, right? Or I can save the session and so people can view it later. Great. So I will definitely do that. All right, guys. So please give me your feedback at the end of this. I'd like to hear it. Please follow me. I announce everything on Instagram because I feel like everyone's on Instagram, not because I have a particular liking for the topic, for the platform. So you can follow me at Ram underscore Balmore. Okay. All right. And just to finish the session, because I thought a lot of people will ask, here is Leah. So you can see her. I woke her up, so she's very mad. And she will be joining us for the next session as well. Okay, everyone. Okay. All right. Bye bye.